Hello and welcome to the Kingston Grammar School podcast. Throughout this series, we will be speaking with faculty and students alike about important topics surrounding the Kingston Grammar School, or KGS, community.
School is definitely different. We have to wear masks and stuff, but once you start getting through the day, you don't really notice it as such.
The school gym has become a COVID testing centre. Looks like a big medical facility.
I think I've been quite lucky that they've had a lot of online provision and been able to support us a lot. So I think that I haven't missed out too much.
I am your host, Shannon Vandermark, and whether you are a present or future parent or student, or simply generally interested in KGS, you are very welcome. I'll just give you a little history and context for anyone new to Kingston Grammar School. KGS is an independent coeducational day school located in Kingston upon Thames, England. Officially founded in 1561, the school can trace its roots back to at least the 13th century. KGS is one of the most successful coeducational schools in the country. Inspirational teaching and a deep commitment to pastoral care means that students grow in confidence and understanding, and individual talents and creativity are able to flourish. In this episode, we are talking about education in the time of coronavirus and how KGS specifically acted during this time to ensure the academic and pastoral well-being of their students, no matter what the circumstances. We discuss how KGS pivoted into their online learning programs and how the faculty continues to support students in this time of uncertainty. My guests today include Head Master Stephen Lehec, Deputy Head Pastoral Sarah Humphrey, and Head of Wellbeing Nick Forsyth. Because the schools have only recently opened their doors again, we will be conducting these recordings over Zoom until guests are allowed back into the school. I mean, it seems only fitting to conduct these recordings for this episode about education over lockdown via some sort of video conferencing software in any case. I am thrilled to be sitting down with Head Master Stephen Lehec. Stephen's teaching experience includes history, English, politics, and classics, and alongside teaching, he has coached football, cricket, and rugby. Headmaster of Kingston Grammar School since 2014, Stephen is currently studying a business, finance, and economics course with Harvard Business School, is learning to play the piano, and training to be a fully qualified cricket umpire. Stephen, I don't know how you find the time, but I so appreciate you being with us today. Welcome.
You're welcome. It's lovely to join you. Hi.
Hi. It sounds like you really know how to fill your time, and you're such a busy headmaster. You must never sit down.
I don't sleep.
No, that's the key.
So I love reading, I love doing courses, I love playing sport, watching sport, coaching sport. I love watching what the kids in school are doing. And you didn't mention that I'm a big fan of Crystal Palace Football Club, which normally most people kind of squeeze in because it's the one detrimental point. They say, you've got all these great things, but why do you support Palace?
Do you know why? Because for me to start that conversation, it would highlight how little I know about football.
So do fans of Crystal Palace.
Right. So we're one and the same.
Absolutely. Don't tell anyone I said that.
If you could just set the scene at school, what's been happening this week? Where are you? Well, actually, last week you went back.
So we're back. There was so much potential for turmoil and upheaval around the pre-return testing, then the return, public transport, mask wearing, moving around school, classes. We have invested in the world's supply of Perspex screens,
right,
to kind of separate things. And actually, as long as we were left to get on with it, which pretty much schools were by and large, which was great, we were able to get all the testing done before everybody came back so that everybody could come back on that Monday. Everybody did come back. Everybody wanted to be here. Everyone's settling back into their routines, into their lessons. We've done nearly 2,500 tests over the last week and a bit.
Wow.
Because everyone's had to be tested 3 times. 95% of the student body are doing the tests. The upper 6 are doing the tests whilst they're also taking some exams.
Wow.
So they come out of exams to drop-in tests. The school gym has become a COVID testing centre. Looks like a big medical facility.
Wow.
But the most important thing is despite the fact that as everyone walks in the morning, you say, good morning, have you got your mask? Good morning, well done for wearing a mask. Good morning, have you sanitized your hands? You're still saying good morning. And you're seeing them physically walk into school. So I'm walking down the road. I've started doing a lot more walking during lockdown. So I now walk to and from school rather than driving, which is obviously great for me. But it means I see all the children coming in and going home and, morning, sir, how are you doing? And actually, it's all just so much more positive, and having everyone in school, it's noisy, it's buzzy, it's fun, it's friendly. It just feels so right. And it's kind of lifted everyone's spirits, despite the fact we're all dealing with a lot of bit of turmoil and some stuff to achieve and some things to get used to, but it just feels great.
Yeah. I mean, they were talking a lot on the news about just people not realizing how much they were missing the sound of kids playing in a playground, or, people who lived near schools, just the silence, and how having that back has been helpful for everybody, I think, mentally. It's spring and you can hear kids outside.
Absolutely. It's all part and parcel of what we are used to, and you quickly take it for granted. But then when it's missing, it's like all those things. You don't know how much you miss something until it's gone. And then having it all come flooding back. And it all does come flooding back. 800, 850, 980 students all flood back at once. They just all arrive en masse, train, bike, bus. They all just come in by 50, 100 at a time, coming through different gates. And all of a sudden, the place just becomes, the vacuum gets filled, which is just brilliant.
Can you talk about the steps that you took over lockdown to support the Kingston Grammar community of faculty, students, and parents? I know you took a really active role in communication.
I did a really silly thing. So I kicked off by thinking, right, this is proper emergency time. This is what all your training prepared you for. So, and actually there was a lot of logic to sitting down with my senior team, who were brilliant, and saying, so there's a big team of 8 of us, and we're saying, right, you're going to deal with that, and you're going to deal with that, and you're in charge of those communications, and you're in charge of those people. So we had lessons and learning and getting online and talking to the heads of year to be in touch with the students about well-being, and everybody was delegated a task. And I kind of, whoa, that's brilliant. Sat down, picked up a book, thought, what do I do? What job have I given myself here? I've been a brilliant delegator. What am I going to do? And I thought, actually, do you know what? The kids, the students, and maybe the parents to an extent too, need to hear from me. And I thought, I don't want to be full of my own kind of self-importance, but I can't just be resting up in the background. So I did a silly little video on YouTube. I thought, do you know what? If we're going to be, schools going to be closed, I'm going to learn some new things. I thought, I'm going to teach myself how to create a YouTube video. Much easier than I thought, by the way. And then that became just a bit of a thing of, actually, you have a theme for the week. And you follow that theme through, in terms of, if your theme is about diversity or women in science or well-being or, traveling, whatever it happened to be, we did favorite movies, favorite books, favorite places to go, favorite foods, funniest stories. And we got into this theme of Movie Monday, Tracks Tuesday, Wacky Wednesday, Throwback Thursday, Friday finales. And the Friday finale would always be a quiz at the end of the week. So my communication ended up being just, I think, holding the community together would be overstating it. So that would sound like I'm full of my own self-importance, and I really am not. But it was that sense of doing things that absolutely anybody could engage with without having to do anything other than laugh at me or join along with me, say, oh, that's a good book, that's a good movie, I didn't know that before. My job was to make sure that everybody else was okay, communicating with parents via kind of letters and emails and that stuff, but actually offering these things up that were just easy to join in with, and just a bit of fun.
But I noticed that you did kind of tie in what was going on in the world.
Exactly. We talked a lot about being proactive in your community, looking after others, NHS heroes. One of the biggest stories, obviously, during the first lockdown was the Black Lives Matter movement and the death of George Floyd. And it was all well and good putting out a letter to alumni, to students, to parents, to say, we take this seriously. We're going to look at decolonizing our curriculum. We're going to look at what authors we read. We totally get what's going on here. And it's important for all of us to reflect. We've all got a role to play. And nobody can say, I'm fairly and squarely clear of any unambiguous kind of prejudice or bias. Actually, everyone should stop, look, and think, actually, this is an issue. What can I do to contribute to make it better?
Kingston Grammar is certainly an academic school, but with a tremendous focus on students and student care. How did you keep an eye on pastoral care?
With the academic, you could, I delivered some lessons. Sorry, I'll say that with surprise. It's not, even I delivered some lessons. We delivered lessons, and even if people had their cameras on, you could tell the knowledge was being imparted because you were delivering it and people were at the other end. So you could tell they were receiving it, but you didn't know how much understanding they had. But then they could do some work and they'd submit that work and you could check their understanding. So the academic, there was that moment of, I haven't got them in the room, but I know I'm going to get something back. Whereas with pastoral care, you can do talks, you can put out letters, you can do tweets, you can do emails, the heads of year, the assistant heads of year, the tutors, we can do all of that stuff. But how do we know whether it's hitting the right note, getting through, and people coming back to us? And the key thing was to say that because you don't know, and it's different for each individual, with something like pastoral care, you've just got to throw as much bread on the water as possible. So you communicate with parents about pastoral care, with students, you do it from tutors, you do it from heads of year, assistant heads of year, you do phone calls home to those people who might be vulnerable. You offer online chats to those people they're in single parent families, or they live in a flat rather than a house, so they might have a garden. We did the same with staff who are maybe struggling with circumstances. So you're proactive around, how you doing? How's things? Did you see that thing? Did you see my email? Did you speak to so-and-so last week? And what happens then is you build up a little network of communication, of putting people in touch with each other as well. And then each student and sometimes each parent would find that person that they felt comfortable talking to. And so for some students, big families or really good neighbors, not a problem. Thank you, school. You're doing a great job. We don't need any more. But some families, maybe 10% of families and 10% of students, I need that a little bit more. I haven't got a sibling. I haven't got that access to some facilities. My Wi-Fi's down. So fine, we'll get on the telephone. That one time they needed you, you were there, the connection built. You could set up peer systems, buddying systems. So I have to say that the pastoral care wasn't just the pastoral team as we perceive it. It came throughout the whole school. Right. Everybody took a role. Everybody saw it as their job to keep an eye on the students and their well-being.
Wow. It's lovely to hear that there was that same care taken for the faculty too, and parents, because sometimes I guess it might seem like a vacuum between the school and the student, and then everybody else is on the periphery. But this was something that everybody was experiencing together, and the school was the common.
Exactly. So we had to make sure that we also had mechanisms for day-to-day, week-to-week communication with staff, that everybody knew who to speak to if they were having an issue or a bad day or were ill. And lots of parents kind of increasingly got in touch with saying, that was great, that really helped. Sometimes you didn't know you'd helped until they told you it helped, and it's because something's in place. And of course, there were lots of concerns around, families' well-being, the economics around COVID, and lots of people got in touch, and people were getting quite frightened by the potential consequences, probably still are in some cases. Sure. And it was important to say that the schools there will listen, we're going to do what we can, but we can help and we can do this. And that to me is one of the incredible positives of COVID and lockdown, is that actually we've come back stronger because we've had to.
How do you feel about where you are right now, not knowing exactly what comes next?
It's such a weird duality. On the one hand, you're like a hamster on the wheel. There's so much going on, doing so much, you just can't stop running, but you're literally just running around in circles. But if you don't keep running, the wheel will stop, and that's dangerous. But on the other hand, you feel like the world is on pause because you can't move anything forward strategically because you don't know what's coming next. So you're just really running to stand still. And I'm quite excited for the moment, and it might come in the summer, it might come next September, because schools operate in this strange way of, January to December doesn't count. It's August to September that counts. Right. We're like our own weird version of the financial year. You know, we kind of operate on an academic year. But I'm really excited when we can stop and say, we've got some really good student numbers. We're as popular as ever, if not more so, as a school. We've paused on some developments. So we want to do some really exciting things with the premises, but we haven't paused on other things that we've had to really run with, which is like the introduction of one-to-one devices, laptops for students, that kind of, because that just gathered pace and it's just happened.
Sure.
And so I'm really excited for that moment when the running on the hamster wheel and stop the world, I want to get off, actually come back together again and you're in a scenario where you can begin to plan, and each term you see plans being fulfilled, and it gets, you start to see the benefits of having gone through the pain.
Yeah, it is exciting to think that point where we can be retrospective about it is approaching, as opposed to being so in the middle of it that you can't really make sense of anything.
People have said in retrospect, and there's some great quotes and phrases around this, that you don't know how much you've got inside you until, you're challenged to deliver. And actually, I think it's only now we look back and think, wow, how quickly did we adapt? How quickly did we say, let's just deal with this? People didn't sit at home and say, oh, I can't teach to a computer, or I couldn't possibly learn online, or I don't have this, or I don't. Everyone just said, yeah, let's do it. And that's probably the most incredible thing.
Well, this has been so great. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. It's been really nice.
I think it's definitely been a strange year, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's been too hard to adapt. It's just one of those things where you sort of become used to it. It's weird for sort of the first month or so, but then much like school becomes, this is how it is. Online school just becomes, this is how it is.
With my school, I think I've been quite lucky that they've had a lot of online provision and been able to support us a lot. So I think that I haven't missed out too much.
Next, I was joined by Deputy Head Pastoral Sarah Humphrey. Also a geography teacher, Sarah has been with Kingston Grammar School for 13 years and currently oversees the pastoral care and is the designated safeguarding lead. Sarah's passion for geography and travel is not confined to the classroom, however, as Sarah is an avid traveler herself and oversees all of the school trips and visits, her favorite destination being Iceland. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today about education in the time of coronavirus. Anyone who embodies your level of wanderlust, is feeling pretty antsy right now, I know.
Oh, absolutely.
So I guess I just wanted to jump right to a question about the necessity for pastoral care. And has that become more pronounced over the past year, do you think?
Whether it's become more pronounced, it's changed. I think the expectation of parents and students has probably changed a little bit, and expectations on schools has changed. But I think the level of care that we show our students is always there. I think just the challenges change and the way that we do it changes, and the different hurdles we have to jump over have changed, if I'm honest.
Sure. Well, take us back to the first lockdown, the pressure of the immediate action you had to take back in March of 2020. Can you remember that day when you had, 48 hours to prepare how you were going to speak to the students and the parents? Can you remember?
I think I can remember the day vividly, the Wednesday that we were told that schools were going to close on the Friday. And then you've got lots of really practical issues that you need to get over quite quickly. So, and for lots of students, it comes down to, where's all my stuff at school? Do I need all my books? What stuff do I need at home? So it's about managing their stress levels and that practical side. So in the immediate moment of the lockdown coming, they're not thinking about, how am I going to access my assembly? Or if I've got a problem, who am I going to talk to? Their things are really immediate about, how am I still going to do my lessons? So our immediate care for the children was in around the really practical. So what will they need at home? So they need IT access. How will they access their lessons and all of that? So that was really day one, the Thursday. And then on the Friday, our very last day, I think the realization came for all the students and the staff that actually on the Monday, they're not going to see these people in the flesh anymore. And that's quite an emotional thing for the students. Actually, once they've got all their bits and pieces at home, it's actually, I'm not going to see my tutor every day. I'm not going to see my friends every day. And that almost that sense of loss comes in. And I do remember the end of that day on the Friday where we stood outside the school gate and the students left to go home. Was really quite emotional for some of them, particularly I think those students who are only children. So actually they're going to be at home by themselves, or those students whose parents were working in critical industries. So they were going to be out during the day and those children were going to be at home or potentially coming into school. Obviously, we offered full supervised learning for those students whose parents were critical workers. But I think that emotional side was really hard. And then that first Monday where you log on at 8:30 with your tutor group and you stare into the abyss as to who is there and what do they need and how are they feeling, and the whole technology side. And I think it shouldn't be underestimated how far we've come in terms of the technology. When I think back to that first week, and just in terms of the platforms that we're using, Microsoft Teams that we were using in the first lockdown, you could only have 4 people on the screen at once. Well, in a tutor group of 24 children, that's really challenging. So over time, things have evolved, and now you can have screens full of faces, which is great. But there were certain challenges right at the start linked to the technology. I think there were challenges linked to what we felt we could achieve. And so we were learning very, very quickly. It was a steep learning curve, but it's one we got over very quickly.
And having to learn and perform simultaneously.
Yeah. And I think as a teacher, that's okay, because I have my script. I know what I'm going to do in my lesson. So at the end of the day, I can just about get through that. But I think pastorally, where you want children to engage and potentially talk about difficult things or their feelings, that's hard enough in a classroom setting. It's even harder when they can't see you. You're not sure of the space they've got, how private is it at home. We had some challenges with some of our pastoral education where we might be doing some quite sensitive topics, which are hard enough in the classroom, but to do them where you can't see the children is very, very difficult. So the pastoral side was difficult to overcome at the start, definitely.
You had some great ideas on how to keep the students engaged and how to keep your community really strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing for us was to have structure. So I think what we didn't want was every year group doing something slightly different or trying to reinvent the wheel all the time. So we tried to put a really strong structure in place where you had assemblies at the start of the week and at the end of the week. And the end of the week assembly was taken by the headmaster. He made a film every week, which was amazing, where he recapped what's gone on in the week. And that was really important. But at the start of the week, you need to have something you're going to hang your hat on. What is it that we're going to focus on this particular week or over the next 2 weeks? And you try and have as many things linked to that. So particularly for our younger students, say years 7 to 10, we have weekly challenges where we'll say, we want you to do certain things. So it might be, we're going to focus on time with the family this week. So what we want you to do is to all do something with your family and send us a photograph or a film of that or a drawing of that. So you get children to do things outside of the lesson time. And then you celebrate those. So we would give awards for those children who've done the best things. We would put them out on our Twitter feed. That became really important for us. And then we would send those to the head so that on the Friday, he could then celebrate those things on film. And that was really positively received. And it just meant that rather than thinking, right, I'm off school now and I may not come back for 10 weeks, children and staff were able to see, right, well, we're going to do something on family, something on community, we're going to do something on, it just gave a little bit of structure to that time off. And that helped with that feeling of, we have actually no idea how long this is going to last for. But actually, if we know what we're going to focus on over the next few weeks, it makes that passage of time a little bit easier. We found that really useful for staff as well as students and their own well-being and sense of space within that, just that abyss of time that we had. As the period went on, we did have to make some changes because I think at the start, we just packed lots of stuff in. We had loads of tutor activities. We wanted to do stuff every day. But actually, some children just need time to talk and space to talk. And so once Microsoft Teams was able to expand the number of screens it was using, we were able to have like 9 students on a screen at a time. That was a real game changer for us because then you can have a tutor with a group of 9 children. So you can then say to the other 9, right, you're going to go off and in your form period, you're going to go and do some work on your challenges, but I'm going to talk to these 9. And that made a real difference. And we were able just to slightly relax off this idea that we had to fill every second of the day. Actually, there was a space for just talking and talking through the things that they were concerned about, and then doing some profiling in the year group. So saying, we're going to have a think about those students that we know are living by themselves, or those students who've got, live a long way away, or whatever it is. You're able to sort of target different groups of students and their particular needs and put that together. So it's this constant idea of what we decided on a Friday. We didn't just stop there and say, well, that's it now. There's no change coming. It was this constant refinement.
And you were saying that pastoral care has changed and the areas of emphasis have changed. Do you think that that's a result of the current situation, or do you think the current situation has highlighted maybe these areas that haven't been as explored before?
Possibly. I think there's a danger in sort of blaming everything that we're seeing now on this period of lockdown, because I think all students and all adults have had issues before that. I think some of the bigger issues that came out, some students really struggled with a lack of social interaction. They became really lonely. And the feedback from parents is as soon as they came back to school on Monday, lots of those anxieties about loneliness and interaction all melted away because they were back in school.
Sure.
But I think the bigger issues about it's longer term issues. I think particularly for some of our older students, it's this uncertainty about the future. What's the impact on their life chances, because they've potentially not going to go through the same thing as children 2 or 3 years ago. So it's about managing their worry and their expectation. And also this feeling that some of them have that school's not quite in control because we're having to wait for governments to make decisions.
It's really those lessons in how little control anyone really has, I guess, that they're having to learn at a very young age.
Yeah, and I think lots of students like to think the school has the answer for everything. And to a degree we do, and we're able to do a lot of things. But in this current situation, we're waiting for the government to say, when can you go out on trips again? And when can you do this? So lots of that is out of our control. And I think for staff as well, that's been a big realization about where you fit within the machine of your own country.
And are you letting the students or parents know any kind of wish list of when you could start trips up again, or are you not even projecting?
Yeah, no, we are. We've got a provisional trips grid for the summer term and further on. And, we're having open conversations with them. I think they can see it. They can see that the trips world might be opening up. So we've got to be on the front foot for that at the moment, because the moment that schools have the green light for trips or countries open up, everyone will go for it. So you need to be ready to go. And I think there's a real appetite now for getting out of the local area and doing some really exciting, interesting things. And I think, I have a huge passion for it, and I think there's a huge educational value for it. So, we're starting to think. I'm having conversations with staff about where we might take students in the summer of 2022. So, those plans are in train.
Okay.
Definitely.
So, you were talking a bit about Microsoft Teams and systems that you had to improvise and had to evolve with time. How did some other systems or technologies evolve during lockdown?
I think one of the key things that we learned as staff is that we think students like to communicate with us by email. That's how we communicate. And the texting chat sort of function with Microsoft Teams, the children really like that. All of them do. They like that kind of instant messenger thing. And so actually, once we got over our own personal reservations about that became a really good way to communicate with students. And in a pastoral capacity, we made some real headway with some students on that. They find email of a different generation. They think it's only for old people. So that's like people over 22. They find that way of communicating is too formal for them. So actually, pastoral staff used the chat on Microsoft Teams really, really well. And it's because it's instant. You just write it. We've had to get over some issues where students have had to remember that they're still talking to staff. So there is an etiquette around that. But actually, some students really opened up by being able to type.
Right.
And use that. And we've continued using that since we've come back to school. Some students will still write to their pastoral staff, their heads of year, using Microsoft Teams, the messaging function. And that's been really great. The video function as well was really good. We had a cameras on policy at KGS. So in lessons and in some pastoral settings, we will chat to children over Microsoft Teams with the camera on. That was really effective. Obviously, there's clear boundary rules that you have about that, but they were respected, and that worked really well.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any initiatives or programs that you developed during this time that you're particularly proud of?
We're really proud of the fact that we were a school that managed to get lots and lots, if not the vast majority of students out doing physical exercise in one form or another. So either through the continuation of PE and games lessons. I'm conscious that some schools just didn't do that. And so the engagement of students to do with their physical well-being was huge. We were able to still keep doing that. We were able to still run what we call sort of campaign weeks. We often have a theme in a term. We might do one on sort of the place of women, or we did one on Black History Month. We were able to still do things like those campaign weeks when we're off school. So we kept lots of things going, just do them in a different way. So I just think we're really proud of the fact that it was almost like a continuous level of pastoral care. It didn't dip or significantly alter. We were able just to keep the things going. It was almost became seamless, and down to the fact that students were still going outside and doing their physical activity and engaging with their tutors and learning and talking. We're just really proud of that. And the feedback from parents was incredibly positive.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add about the past kind of year? And
we just want to say thank you to the parents and the students for the support they gave us. They realized it was a steep learning curve and they were all so encouraging and supportive. And that really made it a much easier process for us. So we're very grateful to the supportive community that we have.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I did hear, around that other schools would be having lessons online or they'd have difficulty getting access to laptops and things to get onto Microsoft Teams. Hearing stories like that made me feel very grateful that we were able to carry on as we do. And being in my A-level year, it's so vital that we did get those classes and carry on with our learning to be able to do our exams. So obviously the people in my school and myself are in a very fortunate position of being able to just carry on as we were. So yeah, definitely grateful for that.
School provided a place where even when everything else was a bit all over the place, there were just general things that we knew were going to happen. There was a timeline within school, even if there wasn't outside of school.
I think I missed out on just being with my friends, really, because this is now my last year at school and I haven't been able to spend that time with my friends, just going out for lunch together, even in lessons, just having a bit of fun. I mean, it was my 18th birthday a couple of weeks ago, which was quite sad. So I missed out on a nice celebration with my friends for that. I'm also deputy head girl, so it's quite sad I haven't had the assemblies or the meetings that we normally have, events to run. So I've missed out on, in some ways, in that. I mean, it probably has been an easier role for me.
Finally, I sat down with Head of Wellbeing, Nick Forsythe, who has taught biology at Kingston Grammar for the last 17 years. As a passionate advocate for pastoral education, Nick organizes national conferences on mental health, relationships and sex education, and growth mindset, and regularly talks to teachers, students, and parents on a range of safeguarding and well-being issues. I asked him first about how the events of this past year might have affected the mental well-being of students.
I think if we're talking nationally, schools are great levelers. If you don't have the tech at home, you can come into school to get them. You can get the support that you need in school. So, of course, lots of children will manage, but there are significant numbers of children that will struggle in future years because of the pandemic. I'm sure of that. And I think it's a worry when we hear a lot about, children are resilient, children will bounce back. And that may be true for lots of children, but it's certainly not true for all children.
No, not at all. So seeing as there is such a wide range of students with varying needs and indeed with varying support systems, can you talk a bit about the steps you took with KGS to ensure that the mental well-being of students was being looked after when the students weren't physically coming into school?
Well, I think we put a lot of practical steps in place quite early on. So, for instance, we recognised that it wasn't particularly helpful for children to be on their screens all day long. That is effortful. Mm-hmm. So we made the lessons a lot shorter. We made significant breaks of, say, 15 minutes between each lesson so that you could just go out and get a bit of air or get stuff together rather than just bouncing from one online lesson to another. We also, for the younger ones, stopped homework. We didn't think it was, helpful at all for them to be on their screens all day. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the day, they've suddenly got another hour or two of schoolwork to do. That was not a good idea. We also had, in the most recent lockdown, a wellbeing day. We recognised that children were just struggling, the teachers as well. You could just tell everyone was so tired. And it was still a couple of weeks to go, I think, before half term. So we just built in a whole day of no school, get away from your screens. Yep. And I think that was hugely important. But I think that as a school, apart from the practicalities, I think one thing that has allowed us to come through this relatively well is that we were very much a community and we were very much a connected community.
Right.
The children may not have been in the building, but we were very much still in business as a school. And I think the children knew that. So we were monitoring who was in lessons, who wasn't in lessons. If children weren't turning up to lessons, there was a really quick response by the pastoral team to get in touch and then say, look, are you struggling? What can we do to help? So there was a lot of one-to-one sessions set up. So we picked up quite early those children that were struggling. But for the children that were doing well, we had all of these activities. They were being encouraged to get out and to do things. And social media, I mean, we can talk about social media all day, the good and the bad.
Right.
But in this case, it was a real asset, and you could just go through and see all these creative things that were going on with the children. And they were, as I say, very much connected. So despite the uncertainty, despite the difficulties, I think the children, felt that there were people there that had their backs. There were people there that were there for them, and they knew who they could turn to if they needed that extra support, if they needed that extra help.
And you were saying that the Wellbeing Day, you decided to do something like that because everybody just seemed exhausted. So I just wanted to ask you a bit about that, because I find it incredible. I've obviously suffered from it as well, is that we're doing so much less in a way, but everybody's more exhausted. There's this pandemic fatigue. Can you talk a little bit about what you think about that?
I think we've just all got used to a completely different way of working. And when you put on top of that the anxieties that we've all got, the feelings of uncertainty that we've all got, all of that in the mix has just led to, a sense of weariness, a sense of how long is this going to go on for? And we found that with children as well as with the staff, I think. All of those uncertainties and worries, some families, of course, having to face bereavement and such like, all of that has added to everyone's pressure.
Sure. Which leads us nicely to, do you have any advice to parents getting students back to normal? And I say in air quotes, because as we know, we're probably not going back to normal. We're going back to this new normal. What kind of advice to parents do you have for getting their children acclimated to change, I guess?
Well, after the amount of time we spent at home, this is another big change coming back to school, of course. And I think children just need a bit of time to get back into the routines of school and, going between school and home. So just give them a bit of time and space. Mm-hmm. I would also say that listen to your children. Children spend a huge amount of their time being talked to by adults, whether it's their parents telling them, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, or teachers telling them, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. Mm-hmm. But it's important to remember to actually ask children, how are you feeling? Are you worried? Are you anxious? And different age groups will have different anxieties. So, for instance, our exam groups, of course, they're anxious about the teacher assessments and their future and what's it going to be like if they're moving on to university. These are huge worries. And you've got to keep those lines of communication open, give them that opportunity to talk about this. They may not, especially the older ones, want to talk about it initially, but as I say, if you keep those lines of communication open and give them the time and space, then that's hugely beneficial. If the younger ones are feeling, I don't know, just sad, anxious about things, we know anxiety is a big thing among children. Where does anxiety come from? I mean, we just don't know, but that is something that we've seen a huge increase of in children. So just listen to them and hear what they have to say and try to address their worries and their fears. Reassure them this isn't going to go on forever. Things will be back to normal.
And what about any advice to students or other children who are kind of missing major rites of passage, proms, dances, graduations, school trips?
Yeah, this is a huge one, isn't it? But for the older generation, we've got that experience to think to ourselves, well, it's just 1 year. It's been a year, it's been a bit of a write-off. But if you're, 14 or 15, year is immensely important for you. And of course, in adolescence, it's hugely important in terms of your overall development. So this is a big issue, I think, something that we do have to be mindful of. Perhaps when they look back, they will think to themselves, actually, I surprised myself by how well I managed. Something we talk a lot about in school is things like self-reliance, resilience, independence. They're words we talk a lot about.
Yeah.
But actually, perhaps the pandemic and lockdown has been one big lesson in that, in self-reliance, in independence. And it has been the biggest lesson of all. And for most children, they've come out of it very well and learned that lesson well.
You hit on something that this is a time in these students' lives that they will never forget. And everyone will have their own story and everyone will have their own battle scars, I guess, of what they missed out on and how they managed.
I suppose for all of us, children and adults, it's hit people in so many different ways, depending on your circumstances.
Well, thank you so much, Nick.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Kingston Grammar School podcast. Join us next time when we speak to faculty and students about whether mobile phones in the classroom are friends or foes. Special thanks to our guests in this episode, Stephen Lehec, Sarah Humphrey, and Nick Forsythe. Thank you also to Allison Williams and Libby Elliott. This has been an Applied Reality production, executive produced by Shannon Vandermark, sound designed by Alex Marcoux.